And welcome to the My Horse University and Extension's Horse Quest live webcast on managing live horse events. And our presenter tonight is Karol Dyson. Karol has been an extension educator for 27 years in both Connecticut and Maryland, and currently she's the County Extension Director in Prince George's and Charles counties. She's assumed a prominent role in planning and managing many 4-H events in Maryland, including accompanying 4-H teams to Eastern Nationals in Louisville, Kentucky for several years, and managing the Maryland State 4-H horse shows at the Maryland State Fair. Her main area of interest is the positive impact of horses on youth development and finding ways to involve more kids with horses. Karol received a Bachelor's of Arts degree in Sociology from Trinity College in Connecticut and an MEd in Multicultural Education from the University of Hartford. She has also completed coursework in Ag and Extension Education. A lifelong horse lover, she lives in western Charles County with her husband Tim and their 9 horses. She has 4 children, all of whom have ridden throughout their lives, primarily in the hunter-jumper arena. And she's active in local horse organizations and was honored as the recipient of the Maryland 4-H Horse Program Youth Development Award in 2010. We are also pleased to have Bonnie Boyden for tonight's presentation. Bonnie is a 4-H program management specialist and will be fielding questions in the chat box. If you haven't already, please locate the chat box on the left of your screen. And note that you can ask questions throughout the presentation, and we'll also try to have time at the end for additional questions. And our presentation tonight is being recorded, and we will be uploading it to our website, myhorseuniversity.com, by the end of the week if you'd like to review it at a later time. And for now, I'll turn the presentation over. Okay, folks, bear with us for just a second while we work out an audio problem here. I'm not sure, Karol. Check up at the top to make sure that your little microphone icon is green. And it should not have a slash through it. That means that it's muted. Okay. And it's all plugged in well. Sounded like I was about to hear something there. If your computer has an internal mic, just a built-in mic, then you can try unplugging your headset and we can just see if that will work.
Hello, can you hear me now? Hello.
Yeah, I can hear you. It doesn't sound the best, but let me mute my microphone and then you can...
How about now? I've turned the volume up on my computer.
Yeah, I just hear some sort of odd background noise.
Hello?
Yeah, I can hear you. Let's go ahead and try it, and then if we're still having trouble, if our participants can let us know if they're having trouble hearing, and then we'll see what else we can work out. Okay, I'm not hearing anything again.
How about now? Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can, and that.
Okay, so we are just on my computer internal mic now, rather than on the headset. So can the rest of you hear me? Can we use the text chat and just give us a check if you hear me? Oh, I see at least 2 people typing. How about the rest of you if you're there? Is anyone else here? Amanda, what do you think? Should we just go ahead?
I think so.
Okay, so softly. Well, I have to say, I don't have a great big voice, but I will do my best to speak up. Is this a little better? I had said a few minutes ago, I'm not sure what's happening here, but I said greetings from Southern Maryland, where it seems far more like May than like March right now, with our temperatures in the high 70s and even into 80 this week. But I wanted to share with you tonight some of the experiences that I have had and that I have learned through my many years of working with 4-H horse programs and also with community horse programs. And it's given me some very clear ideas really on how we can best go about managing events that involve horses. And these are concepts really that would apply to other animals, certainly to livestock, to poultry, to dog shows. So not necessarily limited just to horses and certainly not just limited to 4-H. Amanda, I'm not able to advance the slides, it appears. Okay, can we go on to the next one? Are you going to do that?
Oh, I'm afraid your sound is fading.
And my slides are not advancing either.
Are you seeing the second slide? I advanced it for you, but you should be able to, in the lower left-hand corner of your slides, see a couple of arrows.
Oh, okay, I was using my computer. Okay,
yeah.
So, okay. I'm going to try to speak up more loudly again, okay? And if you can't hear me, just go ahead and put a note, and my sidekick here, Bonnie, will give me a poke, and I'll try to speak more loudly. What I'm going to do is I'm going to speak about 2 different aspects of planning these events. The first one really is on the actual planning and management to present an event and things that we need to consider in order to make them a successful and good experience for all the participants. The second part I'd like to focus on is risk management, which, as we all know, has become a major part of what we do working with kids, regardless of our organization or our affiliation, and really working with animals also presents us with so many liability questions and issues that we really didn't have to think about back, even 10 years ago. So I'll go through the first part. If you do have any questions, please write them into the chat box. I'll pause when I get to the risk management part, and we can talk a little about what I've said, and then we'll go into the risk management part. So first of all, I'd like to just talk a minute about what kinds of qualities really help you to be a good manager of an event involving animals. And probably one of the most important is that you have a thick skin. We all know the stereotype about horse people and that they're difficult or that they're, sometimes stubborn or want what they want. And we all know that although that's not true certainly for the majority, sometimes there are some people that really do fit that. And if you are the person who's in charge and responsible, you very well may be the person who will be the recipient of the wrath of an angry parent, or need to be the one to comfort the child who's in tears, or perhaps you have a judge or a show official who's really not very happy with something. So it really does help to have that thick skin. And probably the second thing that I think is really important is that you have the ability to be flexible that you can make a quick decision, that you can stick by your decision and really have a sense in your mind of what should happen so that you can manage the stress as well as helping other people to manage their stress. And it sure does help to have a sense of humor. We all have had those experiences where we end up perhaps having things happen that we never did plan, but if we really try to keep a good attitude about it, we can turn them into a positive thing rather than just a negative thing. So if we talk about types of events, thinking in terms more of youth, but also involving adults as well. We certainly do clinics, we do trail rides, we do shows, we might have performances, of a drill team or a performance where other people might come to participate. There are other things that we do. If you are involved with 4-H, we might have judging practices. We might be doing testings if we have horsemanship standards, or a pony club has testing. So there's all kinds of things that we can do. And every one of those has its own kind of personality and has differing needs. It would be nice if we could say, okay, we need to do this, this, and this for everything. But although there are certain criteria, we also need to be flexible and think what are the differences between a clinic and a show, for example. So it's really important to know what your purpose is. And it might be something very, very general, like if you're having a testing for horsemanship skills, you might want to have a goal that you're going to have at least half of the kids are going to be able to pass the next level, say level 3, level 4, whatever levels your states may use. And that would be your expectation, that's your plan, that's what you're going to build your program to accomplish. But you also need to remember that you're going to have a purpose of just keeping kids safe and of getting kids involved and letting people have the best opportunity that they might have. If it's something, that's a competition, competition does present a whole different set of situations that we need to be aware of, and then some of your purposes will be that, people feel that they've been given equal and fair opportunity to demonstrate their skills or to present what they know, to present their knowledge. Some of the best things to do are those that are just for fun, so it might be a fun show and you do all those things like dollar bill bareback rides and egg and a spoon and those kinds of things. But whatever your goal, whatever your purpose, it's really important that you know that and that all the people who are there have some shared sense of what that purpose is. I think it's when you don't have that shared sense that you get into trouble, that the event may turn into a less than fun and less than happy experience. Just one of my old quotes, by failing to prepare, you're preparing to fail. This is especially true when you're planning and presenting an activity that is a high-risk event. It's crucial then that you prepare, because if you're not prepared, the failure may go beyond just you. So here's where I would start. Let me ask you this. How many of you actually have experience in planning horse events? You just give me a yes or a no. I appreciate that. Okay, thanks. I see the thumbs up. I'm seeing a couple other responses come up. Okay, great. So we have a variety here of people's backgrounds. Really the best way to do this is to just do it. And really, I should say the best way to learn how to do this and get ready is to just pick something and say, okay, we're going to do it. I see, Catherine, that you said you're starting this year. So first of all, you need to start with a written plan, and you need to start early. So it is now March, and I know that here in our local area, we have a Southern Maryland Spring Livestock Show. Already that committee is meeting, and already that committee is planning, because every year they want to make it just a little better than it was the year before. So starting early is really one of the best things that you can do. Really important is to get your site and your date. And sometimes people have these great plans, and they have their program planned, and maybe they're going to have a county-wide horse show, for example, an open show. And they make the assumption that, of course, wherever they've been held in the past is available. Well, then they go, they tell people this is when we'll do it, and then they discover, oh, the riding club, the old people's riding club. And that's not meant to be offensive to anyone. We do have a group here called the Old People's Riding Club. Perhaps it's a national group, I don't know. But, it turns out that they've already booked the site, and that the arena that you were going to use is no longer available. So it's really important that you get your site and you get your date set. And as you're making that selection, think about all the things about a location that make it a pleasant place to be. You need to be sure that there'll be bathrooms, or that there'll be porta potties there if that's what the site offers at that time. You need to be sure about water. You need to think about your energy needs. You may have a great farm that offers to let you host an event at their farm, and they say, oh, we have this huge open field, you can run a cross-country trials or bareback racing, barrel racing, whatever. But then it turns out that, there's no shade at that site, and perhaps there's no electricity or any water within, a couple hundred yards. So you need to think ahead about what you actually need. The other thing you need to think about is what the expectations of the site are, and whether that site, knows what you're going to do, and they are going to allow what you want to do. Sometimes sites have very specific rules. There's a horse show site near us where they will not allow you to bring in an outside truck to drag a ring. So if you can't do that, then you're going to have to pay them, and that can change your budget totally. You've got to pay that extra fee on. Okay, so after you've got your site and you've got your date, then you should develop a budget. And budgets, can range from a couple $100 to thousands of dollars, depending on your event. And if you have entry fees, then that budget will be developed based on those entry fees in those cases. If you don't have entry fees, then perhaps you're looking at small grants, you may be looking at sponsorships and donations. So you need to, right from the start, think about where the funds are going to come from. I know here in Maryland, we have a big emphasis on, cost recovery. And so consequently, we are charging more than we used to for certain events. We do still try to have totally, low fees for 4-H events, but that's changing. So you need to figure out where your money's going to come from and what your costs are going to be. I really recommend having a committee. I know that sometimes a committee of 2 or 3 is better able to get things done. I know I've been to a lot of private shows in my life, and a lot of those shows I see are run by one show manager, maybe an assistant, and they are the king. They decide everything. I found with youth programs, with community events, that really is not the way to go. The more people you get to buy in to what you're doing, the more people are going to be there and to be helpful with you. Make a list. There are some lists out there. You can put in planning horse shows on the internet now. You can find them. You'll find some lists of things that you should do. That's the same with forms. I haven't put in sample registration forms or liability forms because it's very easy to get them offline and to make them fit what you're needing. But the trick about lists is you need to use them. It doesn't do you a lot of good if you have a great list and you even have a timeline that goes with it, but then you're not using it. So once you make your list, try to use it. Plan your work and work your plan. You guys probably all know that. That was one of the first things that I learned when I first became part of Extension, and there are some days I'm still not 100% sure what that means. Okay, Catherine, I see you're saying you can't hear. Can you hear me now? Hello? Okay. Amanda, Catherine is saying she can't hear. Okay, great. I'll just try to really lean in closer to my computer so that I can hopefully be heard. Okay, so as you're using this list, go ahead and check things off as you go. And sometimes I'll make a half check, or I'll make a check and then I'll make a second check through it. You just develop your own system. And you need to use your committee. You need to delegate things. You need to count on your committee. And you need to remember what you've asked people to do. So, for example, with the Maryland State Fair shows, I have a person who, for the past probably 10 years, has set up the trail courses for me for the Western shows. And so this is a longtime 4-H volunteer. He lives on the eastern side of the state, over on the eastern shore. But he, every year, loads everything he needs into his truck, or he talks to the assistant show manager about what he needs. And together, the two of them plan what the course will be. They do send me the course. They develop the course, and they send it to me so I can approve it. And then I just trust them to take care of it. I count on them to just make those classes happen. And that includes, one of them bringing the tools that they need, bringing the hammers and the screwdrivers and the gate posts and all those things. But it's taken a big weight off of me. Trail happens to be a big, important class here in Maryland. And so to find someone that I could just trust to do that and not have to worry about it has been a great relief for me at show management position. But whatever it is, it might be having the same person do your hunter courses every year, or it might be, having the same announcer every year. But delegate those things. If the person that you delegate them to, if it doesn't work the first time, then you just go ahead the next year and find someone else. What you'll need to do, those of you who haven't done this a lot, your first year you're going to really need to follow up pretty closely. Earlier, but you're going to need to be really detail-oriented. You may need to micromanage a bit in the beginning because other people may not really know what they're doing either. This may be a new experience. Not that you don't know what you're doing, but it may be kind of a trial and error for some of these things. I always suggest checking your list at least twice, like a Christmas list, just remember that you as the show manager are going to be ultimately responsible, and you want to make sure that things happen as you want them to happen. Okay, so the budget. I would always put your budget in writing. You may think, oh, this is a small event. I can just keep this in my head. But it really matters that you really know how you're going to pay the bills at the end of the event. And you always should build in some kind of a cushion. Now, you may be in an area where you may have a major donor who you could always go to if you end up $100 short. Or you may, if this is perhaps a county fair show, you may know that your fair will pick up the slack. But in general, for example, if you're doing a clinic, you're bringing in a clinician, and you expect, we did a bomb-proof your horse clinic a few years back. We brought in a really well-known clinician to do this. We had expected to have 100 people on 2 different days, divided. And we only ended up with 80, and that still seemed like a lot of people. Well, what happened was we were so borderline on our budget, we all ended up, we had planned on feeding a lot of the participants. We ended up having to charge the participants for lunch. But we did have, we had a plan in mind. If we didn't make enough money, then we had a way that we were going to be able to pay our bills. So just be sure that you have a plan and that your budget is solid. If it's an event that's not competitive or that is not charging fees, then there are a lot of small grants out there. Some states have like horse industry boards, or they may have state horse foundations that may give grants for this kind of activity. So doing a survey of what's available and what are possible funding amounts is very useful. You know, if you have sponsors, it's very easy to give them some recognition, you know, to make a sign, to name a class after them. If you have a trail class, you can name, the gate after them. There's lots of small ways to recognize sponsors. That is enough for them, you know. They want to be recognized, certainly, but that's really not why they're making their donation. If you do have an educational component, that's another way that you can usually find some funds. People may be more willing to fund something educational than to fund something that is just competitive in their minds. Okay, so for your registration is really important. You know, besides your fees, you need to make sure that your rules are in writing. Some of you may be lucky, you may have very clear rules and guidelines for events in your state. Other states, not quite that clear. So you want to be sure that you have all the important things covered. Deadlines, you know, it's really important to have deadlines because that really tells you a lot about what you're going to have for the event. Emergency contact information. You know, you like to think that most people come with someone else, but that's not always the case. And there are situations where it's very difficult to track someone down if someone gets hurt. If it's an event involving kids especially, then you really would need that. If you're perhaps having a horse camp, I know some states have horse camp, then all those things are really important. Remember, you know, required health documents for your animals. Certainly many states require only negative Coggins, but there are some states that require proof of other vaccinations. Make sure that you've got a system so that you can record that so that you'll be ready to move and not have to be wasting time worrying about that. In Maryland, for example, we have a self-certification form that owners need to fill out when showing their animals if it is a multi-species event. So at a horse show only, people would not need this self-certification form. But if it's at a fair where not only are horses, but there's cows and pigs and poultry, then they would need to have it. So be sure that you know any guidelines that may exist in your state. And there are more and more states that are requiring additional documentation of health vaccinations for animals. So be sure that you check on that. Okay, so for all audiences, you need to remember, I mentioned earlier, the restrooms, electrical needs, but you know, along with electrical needs are things like, I should have called that energy needs, because there are things like lights that you may need, walkie-talkies, timers, things that are battery run. You know, if you are having food there, then you need to think of how that food is going to be cooked or kept warm. If it's hot food, there are health laws that regulate that now in many states. And so you always want to be sure that you're following all of the laws in not only your state, but it also may be within your county, that there are separate laws that regulate some of those items. You know, you need to think some about supplies, and we're talking about basic office supplies. It's always amazing to me that you always end up needing the one thing that perhaps you forgot. So, you know, things like covers to cover your horses if it rains. Or, you know, rule books. It's always good to have rule books, not only your own rule book, but I know many states use AQHA or AHSA as your backup rule books. If you do that, then it's important that you have those books there. You know, it will be the one person out of 100, 200, 1,000 at one show that will challenge something that you do. You know, if it's, you know, you might want to be sure you have pins and strings for numbers, even something like hand sanitizer, which is not a major thing, but is just something that will make things nicer. And certainly, you know, in the restrooms is a good thing to have. And so if you have a person on your committee who might do something like amenities, then that's the kind of thing that they can think about. You shouldn't have to think of all these things on your own. That's what you have a committee for. Awards is a big thing. If you're doing an event that has awards, you know, if you're having a competitive trail ride, then you may have, you know, gotten a sponsor who's going to give some kind of awards, or it may be just a ribbon, you know, and just a ribbon to many kids is just as good as receiving, you know, a $100 award. Something you really need to think about too is selecting your officials. And regardless of what your event is, almost every event either has an instructor, a clinician, a judge, a steward. So it's really important that you think about those officials and you select those who are going to understand the youth that they're working with. If this is a youth event, if it's an adult event or all ages, and you just want them to have good people skills anyway, it's really important that those officials can talk to people and remember that they're representing you. They're representing the organization, whether it's a local riding club or a 4-H group or pony club. You know, they are an extension of you and your organization at that event. Sometimes we forget about publicity, and events involving kids and animals, or any person and animals, is usually a great event that attracts a lot of press. We found out in this area that on weekends, the Washington Post almost always has some photographers out and about that are looking for things to take pictures of. You know, there's not nearly as much news going on in the area on the weekends. So we found that they're a great way to get some publicity if we let them know ahead of time, either a press release, sending an email. You know, you can put it on your website. There are certainly some publicity people that have websites now, and Facebook and Twitter is a great way, using your social media to get the press to know what you do. If you're looking at a 4-H only event, or perhaps a pony club only event, you need to think about the appropriateness of the activities that you selected for the ages of the kids. Many 4-H programs don't allow competitive events for under 8 years old, for clovers, clover buds, clover leaves, whatever they may be called. So it's really important, if you're having any animal events, that you think of who your audience is and what the rules are. If you have any kids with special needs, you know, if you have a child who's hearing impaired or who may have some difficulty with their gait or learning disabilities, it's really important that you take that into account ahead of time. For example, if you're involved with planning a horse judging event, you know, you really might need to have people there who can help kids to make sure they know how to score using their cards, for example. So you need to know those special needs and take account of that. That also includes the number of helpers needed, and I know most youth programs have a specific number of volunteers per number of kids that are required. You need to make sure that you have that and that they have fulfilled whatever volunteer certification program that you have. And of course, there's always the 4-H paperwork. It's really important that you have those kids registered and that they have signed the appropriate releases, and that they're considered bona fide participants, and this is really a big issue in terms of insurance and liability for you as well. Any questions or comments up until this point? Okay, so if we move on and talk a little about personnel that are needed to do an event. You know, most events are a combination maybe of paid and volunteer personnel. So if you're employed by the Horse Show Association or by extension, you would be a paid person. You know, if you do have volunteers, for example, a show secretary or a clinician who may have some connection with you and might be a volunteer, you still need to be sure that their qualifications meet your standards. If they are instructing, you need to know, and you have every right certainly to ask what their credentials are. Certainly certifications and carding, but there's other ways, as you know, to know what a person's skills are and what their knowledge is. You need to know if they have experience with children, and you need to talk to them about youth if this is a youth program. Because the last thing you want is to have an experience where kids are supposed to be learning and having fun, and have them, you know, feeling like everything they're doing is wrong, that all they're doing is being fussed at. So it's important to carefully select your instructors, and that includes people like your secretary if you're having a show. The secretary, you know, is one of the most important people there, because that person lots of times will interpret the rules, will help families and kids to select their classes. So that's an important position. And then also insurance is a big issue. You know, just about all horse show judges now do carry their own insurance, and you certainly have every right to ask for proof of that insurance. You should really consider a written contract, whether you always should have a written contract, actually, particularly if the person is paid, but not only if the person is paid. Sometimes it's equally important to have that contract with volunteers. And if you have definite expectations of what you're expecting, then you just need to say that. You can't really be unhappy with someone if you haven't told them what it is that you want them to accomplish. Lots of judges will have a certain number of hours that they will allow within what they call a day of judging. And if you go beyond a certain time, or if it goes beyond a certain number of hours, then they're going to tack on an extra fee. You need to have that amount, and you know, most judges are not going to negotiate fees unless they are a good friend to 4-H or Pony Club, or they, you know, for whatever reason have a personal relationship in there somewhere that makes them willing to do that. But remember that this is their livelihood. This is, you know, what they do as their regular occupation. If it is not, then you're more likely to get someone who might come in and will be willing to volunteer sometime. You don't always have to have, you know, really high-paid people. You know, there are a lot of people out there because they want to work with kids, they want to help people. You know, they understand that there's lots of kids out there with what might be thought of as a backyard horse, you know, not a fancy horse. There are people that are very willing to work with you and maybe willing to give some lessons, or to, you know, hold a clinic, or, you know, maybe even to start a group because they want to be a volunteer too. So be sure that you have that clear understanding. You may be thinking, when they say, oh yeah, I'll volunteer sometime, you may be thinking that they're going to, you know, volunteer for the whole show and judge, and what they may be thinking is that they'll volunteer any overtime that they might have to put in. Make sure that you outline what expenses will be covered. You know, are you paying for their meals? Are you paying for their mileage? If they need a hotel room, how is that going to be covered? If they're coming from any distance, you know, who covers their airfare? There are some judges that will charge a flat fee for a day, and they aren't going to worry about things like meals, but there are others who want every individual expense that they have covered. You also have the right, especially if you're employing a person, you have the right to determine an expectation of what their behavior might be. And that very well may be that, you don't want to see them smoking around kids. You don't want to hear them cussing around kids. There's some other bad habits that I have seen people demonstrate in situations that not only did I think they should be embarrassed, but it also embarrassed me because I was the person who had contracted with them to come. So if you have any question about that, feel free, and you can certainly say, that this youth program, has a set of standards, and that these are the standards you expect all of your volunteers to provide. Now, the great majority of show officials and judges that I have worked with have wonderful people behavior, and they're always polite, they're very professional, and that's really what you're looking for. You really don't want someone who's going to be buddy-buddy with a kid. You don't want a judge who's going to, put down one kid as they build up another kid. You want them to deal with individuals as needed, but you certainly want them to keep their distance. This is an opportunity at a show to have any favorites. On the other hand, if this is a clinic or a competitive trail ride, something like that, then officials tend to deal with people differently. They tend to, have a different kind of behavior, but my point is that you have every right to have expectations of the behavior that they will be exhibiting during the event. So I want to know if anyone can hear another odd sound coming through, because if you do, we've had some construction in our building, and suddenly they just have started to do something again over our heads. So if you hear, I apologize. There's nothing I can do about this. Okay, we're going to... Okay, great. Thank you. It's been clear. Good. Okay, so resources, there's lots of help out there. And, certainly horse show associations and extension offices and extension specialists. There are local horse people all over. I know where we are. I forever am running into someone who will share with me their horse experience and say, oh, maybe I could help sometime. So you need to look for those people and take advantage of those people. There are lots of businesses that are willing to get involved and to help, and you want to find those too. If you're a competitive event, then businesses certainly are going to deal with you differently than if you're a volunteer program, but they still are looking to sell their product, and so they might be very willing, if you're going to buy, rent a tent from them, they may be willing to let you use some coolers too for ice, that kind of thing. You just need to, work your deals and look for lots of different resources that are out there in your communities. Insurance really is something that you need to look into, and you need to just expect that the unexpected may happen. Your site may have requirements. Lots of places now are requiring that you have a certain amount of insurance, and I know that our university does not provide the amount that the many of our local area sites would like, so we've ended up having to take out additional insurance. But you do need to find out, your organization most likely at a local or national level is going to be offering some kind of insurance that should benefit you. You may need to get a separate liability policy. If you already have one and you can just add an event on, many of them will do that. It, for, a 2-day event potentially can cost you $500 maybe. So insurance is a big deal and it's a big expense, but it's not something that you want to try to go without. Remember that any release form that anyone signs is never 100% binding. Anyone still can sue anyone for anything. That's not to say that it couldn't get thrown out of court. There's not to say that in some states it's not more difficult than in other states, but there is not a 100% protective release form anywhere that I have ever heard of or seen. So if any of you do know of one, please share it immediately. You very well may want to have your own health insurance policy for your participants, for your staff, for your volunteers. You can use, those youth ones like American Income Life and the other one, I'm sorry, I can't think of the name of it. What is it? Yeah, the Brothers, Three Brothers? No, that's the hamburger place, the pizza place. But yeah, Brothers Insurance. But, that at least would cover if someone fell off and broke their arm, or if, someone got sick while you were there. You might want to do that. That's not required. It's something that I know we have done, and it's very helpful that we've had it on a number of occasions. Okay, so any comments or thoughts on this, on the planning part of this, before I move into the risk management? I just looked at the clock and I see my time is really ticking by. Okay, then I will just keep on going. I know we did start a little late, but I don't want to keep you guys up, show you all that nice schedules. So risk management, a term that we hear all the time now. We're all concerned about risk management. And if we think about what it really is, then we need to think of it as something that we all do every day. It's just part of our lives. Okay, so a process used to identify risk of injury and loss. So that's what we're looking at. We're looking at what are the risks in these events that we might be organizing. What are the potential bad things that can happen, and then what can we do to eliminate the risk, or, since that's almost impossible, to at least reduce the risk. And this really applies to almost any program that we do as volunteers, as staff, as program managers. We need to be thinking about controlling the risk and managing the risk. So some things to think about. Risk management really is proactive, okay? We want to think ahead of what this is rather than to react after something happens. Now, it's better to react than to do nothing, but what we really want to do is to take charge of what's going on so that we know what to do if something does happen. So planning for the worst so that even though we never expect it to happen, we'll be ready if it does. And, we all know lots of the risks involved with horse activities. We read about it and hear about it every day. Every time I see a kid riding without a helmet, it kind of sends chills down my back because of things that I've seen. So those are the basic things we need to think about. Those basic things like, not wearing flip-flops and wearing hard-soled shoes and those things. But these are the things that are at risk. Okay, first of all, and most importantly, always is people, and that's our number one concern. People, safety first. Any program that you ever do with other people, your number one job is keeping them safe. With horses, it's also property. It's not only the animals, but especially the animals. We are seeing more and more some very high-cost horses out there, and we also are seeing high-cost other animals, whether it's in the livestock range or dogs or anything else. But it's also things like property, and being aware of the potential for theft. People's financial status can be at risk if someone did get hurt. What's the impact on that? And certainly for each one of us, it's our own personal reputation nation's reputation, and our public image. What we do and how we manage and plan things certainly says something about what we do in our professional lives and in our volunteer lives. So we need to analyze. That's one of the first things we need to do with risk management is to analyze what the possibilities are, what are the hazards. We need to, think about what is the worst it could be, how common might this be, and in most cases, it's not going to be very frequent. In most cases, accidents, things that happen with horses are not going to be very severe. What we need to do, though, is to think about the worst it can be and think, so how can we make that less? How can we reduce the danger of, some horse running off with a kid going over a fence, or some horse, bucking someone off on a trail ride. What are things we can do to address that? And you do need to ask the big question, should we go forward with this event? Is this something we should be doing? Are the benefits greater than the damage that could be caused by the risk? Now, I, in almost every case, would come down pretty firmly on the side of yes. I think that we can only protect people so far, and people have to take responsibility for themselves. Having said that, we still can do Amanda, yes, the headsets are unplugged. I don't think there's anything here that could be doing it. I'm sorry. If we ever do this again, we're going to really work out this sound much better. So do the benefits outweigh the risk? And I think what you want to do is you want to be able to say yes. You want to be able to look at your situation, think of your plan, and feel confident that you've done what you can do to keep people safe and to have all the pieces in place so that you're going to have a nice, safe event. So here are the strategies. You can avoid the risk. So you might say, okay, we're not going to have any horses. We're not going to have kids jumping any horses. And that way we'll avoid the risk of the kid falling off the horse. So that may not be the best solution that you would want to have, because that for some people is just an intrinsic part of what they do. So maybe you want to be sure that your fences are set up at always the right distances. Sometimes that doesn't happen, or you want to make sure that there's no area along the ring that for whatever reason horses seem to be spooking in. If that's the case, then you're going to make sure that your horses aren't going into that corner. There are things you can do to avoid what would be the most risky environment. You can transfer some of your risk. And by that, I mean you might be able to pass the responsibility on to someone else. For example, perhaps your fair board will undertake to be the responsible party for an event, for a show. Perhaps you have a parks department that might be in charge of the location where the trail ride's going to be. And you can ask them if their insurance can cover. So you can try to transfer some of that liability to someone else. Reducing, that's kind of the same as avoiding, the secondary things that I spoke about there, or more about reduction of what the risks were. If you're having a clinic, maybe if you're going to teach kids how to pick hooves correctly, you can have an older member with a younger member, and you're sure that the older member knows how to do this, so that there's someone who's giving immediate attention to it. Or you can reduce the risk by saying, okay, so maybe that's really not what we want to do. We don't want to get these younger kids working with feet, so let's really focus on grooming today. So reducing the possible risks. And then, the last is what most of us end up doing primarily, and that is that we accept the risk by doing the first three things as much as possible, and then we accept the risk that remains, understanding that not many kids, but understanding that many events are just innately going to have some risk. And we can't keep kids wrapped in bubble wrap all the time. We can't totally protect kids. They're just experiences they need to have, and so what we can do is make them as safe as possible and just move forward with it rather than denying those opportunities. So something that's really good to do is to create a plan for your risk management. And in that plan, you're going to outline what the risks are. The obvious risks of horses, being thrown, being stepped on, but there are unrecognized risks too. And, they might be things like, you might come across a snake and the horse might get bit, or you might have a child who is allergic to the insect spray that the kid on the horse next to them uses. There's those things that you can't imagine ahead of time, but that are there. So you just need to recognize that there are risks that cannot be foreseen, that you cannot know about. And in your release forms, you need to say that. So, sometimes we'll see release forms now that will go through specific known risks that might happen. And then they might also have a clause that says something about and other things that may happen up until death. It's always something that kind of freaked me out when I would see it when my kids were younger. But it's an effort to include anything that you can't imagine happening but could. So you need to get that all down, and you need to have people sign that. You need to, certainly if it's a minor, of course, a parent has to sign. A parent has to sign, but adults also need to sign this for themselves. And as I say, it is not going to give you 100% protection at all, but there's a lot of evidence that shows that people who do sign release forms are less likely to sue. So it's really worth doing. You should know where your nearest emergency response team is. If you're in an area like we are, we can probably figure that within 15 to 20 minutes, almost anywhere in the state of Maryland, except for a few places, there's some kind of emergency response. You need to have your rules, and you need to send them ahead so that people know what they are. And as I mentioned earlier, it's really important that references to health forms and health information in your plan. Remember the weather. Be wary of weather. Weather is always something that surprises happen all the time. Have a basic first aid kit. Have an EMT on the grounds if at all possible. EMTs don't always call it 100% right, but they certainly have a much more likely possibility of making the right decisions about health. Have a vet on call if possible. Have a farrier if possible. And one thing that you should know is you should never move a child on your own. Like, you should never attempt to transport any person as a child if they're hurt. You always want to get emergency help, and that really comes back to protecting yourself. And then know your ratio of your adults to children. At certain ages, you certainly always need the 2 deep rule. You always need to have probably at least one adult for every 8 to 10 kids, regardless of their age. If they're younger, you need more, 1 to every 5 probably. So safety first, that's really what the risk management plan is all about. Keeping your participants safe, your animals safe, your audience safe. Go overboard and don't worry about it. You may have some people that will fuss and protest about it, but you will know that you have done everything that you could to maintain safe practices. You should have all your event staff following the same policies. So if you don't allow Crocs at a horse event, we do not where I am, then there's no reason you have to allow volunteers who are going to be around the horses to wear Crocs. You know, they should have the same safety rules. Their feet are just as sensitive as the feet of Okay, and then at the end you need to evaluate. Go back and look at what your original objectives were, what your purpose was. You know, did it happen? Did your event meet that purpose? Did people have fun? You know, did they learn something? Do you have any crises? You did? Were you prepared? You know, were you able to deal with them and feel comfortable about your decisions? Keep lots of notes, because once you do this, then you're going to be really well prepared to go out and do it again. And then there are some rewards. In the beginning, I think I said there was some rewards. You know, and your very bottom line is, was it fun? You know, was it fun for you, and was it fun for others who were involved? All the planning and all the hard work that we do, and goodness, let's hope that someone is having fun and learning at the same time. That really does conclude my comments. I apologize for all of the sound issues that we've had. I know it may have been difficult for some of you to hear on occasion, but I appreciate you sticking with it. So thank you. Any questions or any comments?
Well, I just want to take a minute too to also say thank you so much, Karol, for your presentation tonight, and thanks to all of you for participating. And we will send out an emailed invitation to participate in an online survey about tonight's webcast. So if you'd like to take a couple minutes to fill that out and send it back, then that would be great. And our next free monthly webcast will be on April 24th on the topic of tractor and machinery safety. So you can register online for that at myhorseuniversity.com. And if you have any questions, you can call us at 517-353-3123 or email info@myhorseuniversity.com. And our webcast was recorded tonight if you'd like to review it at a later date. And thanks again.